So
on
you're
the
going to
phone
run
and
the
everything
report,
else.
but you're typically, if someone checks that box that says yes, I've been evicted, they're out
Yeah,
automatically.
just about. So unless there are super extenuating circumstances.
Like they're your brother.
No, that would violate the law.
Yeah. Good call. Hello, and welcome to the Old Fashioned Real Estate Show. My name is Jeffrey Holst.
I'm Brian Leverage.
And we're going to talk to you about a topic which I really love. And no, in fairness, I know very little about. I usually rely on professional property managers to handle this for me, but we're going to talk about resident screening. And since Brian is a professional property manager, we're going to let him talk most of the episode.
So resident screening is a very important process, probably the most important process, because it does you no good to buy a rental property and consistently put in renters that don't pay the rent. So first we need to identify what makes a great resident. They pay their rent on time, probably that's first and foremost. You want someone that's stayed at the last few residences they've been at for a couple of years a pop. They're low maintenance, meaning they're not bugging you all the time to fix things. And more importantly, as a subcategory of that, they maintain the property in the same condition that it was leased to them in.
And of course, I would assume that you're okay with them calling you if there's an actual maintenance issue.
Yeah, no, and that's actually a great point. You do want people that are responsive. You just don't want people that are
right. Like
nitpicky.
if they have a leaking pipe or something, you want them to call you.
Yeah, exactly. No, the water heater blew out a month ago.
But what you don't want, I think, is someone who calls and says, "There's a nick on the door frame. You got to come fix it." And
right.
Right.
So first and foremost, we'll get our little disclaimer out. Fair housing laws require you to apply your screening standards evenly to all of your applicants. And what would happen as a former attorney, Jeff? Why don't you inform
Well,
your
then I have
audience?
to put my own disclaimer out.
Yeah.
This is not legal advice, and we're not establishing an attorney-client relationship. But it's real bad is what would happen. I'm not an expert on fair housing laws, but if there's significant civil and criminal penalties for violating fair housing laws.
Just to re-summarize, it's not good for you.
That's exactly right.
So first and foremost, your application is your biggest screening tool that you have. And the more information you can get on the application from your prospects, the better. So you want to have job history, but not just job history currently, but maybe the previous one or two employers. You're also wanting to get things like bank statements. You also want to get at least their 3 previous landlords and their contact information, and we'll get into that in a little bit.
Generally, probably pay stubs also, right?
Pay stubs to verify income.
What do you look for income-wise?
Well, we look for 3 times. We as a company look for 3.5 times.
Sure.
Industry standard is 3. We'll kind of get there, but
okay.
Generally on the application, again, people that leave blanks on the application, those should be red flags. So right out of the gate, that's where your application comes into play in terms of filtering some of this information as you evaluate people on a case-by-case basis.
So do you create like a standard rule then in your office that says if there's blanks, then you have to follow up with them or just reject the application, or is there?
Well, we'll require them to complete the application, and we have people in the office that do follow up with them to get said information. Okay, so the first element of your application is running background. Okay, that includes running credit and criminal. You should do both. To not do so would be moving forward at your own peril. Okay, so the first part is a credit report.
Personal note there. I've occasionally neglected to do my background screening, and it's never worked out well for me. You get a good feeling for someone, and that's usually the worst tenant out there.
The feels are not the way you want to evaluate people.
And it's also potential. It's also a potential risk point for fair housing laws if you're doing it based on just feeling.
Yeah. So first thing is, how do you filter a credit report? So a credit report actually tells a story. It's a snapshot of a person's credit history in time at that moment. And so we, as a property management company, are more interested in that story and a little less interested in the score. And to break that down a little bit, we're looking for things that are controllable versus what are uncontrollable. Uncontrollable examples would be things like medical collections, okay? if you get a person gets in a car accident, for instance, not their fault, they don't have insurance to cover the bills, etc. That's going to affect their credit
Sure,
negatively.
and they could even file bankruptcy over something like that.
Yeah.
And I think, but there are other things I imagine that you're really concerned with, like say evictions.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. Again, it's all about the story, right? So evictions, huge red flag. In fact, they're a non-starter. You should never rent to anyone that's been evicted because it will show, history, past is prologue. As
What
they
if
say.
what if the person was evicted when they were 20 years old and now they're 40 years old? So it's like 20 years ago.
Well, usually on a public records search, I think those last between 7 and 10 years.
Sure.
It
Okay.
should
So
have
what if
fallen
it
off.
was 9.5 years ago then?
We probably wouldn't rent to them.
Okay. So
if
if
it
you
shows
see
up on their credit report.
So if you see it at all, you're not going to rent. What if you have I'm imagining on your application you have you ever been evicted?
Yes.
Checkbox. What if they say yes, I was evicted 20 years ago when I was 19? Then what do you do there?
Well, we'll still run it. We advise them against completing the application in advance on that. So
okay.
We pre-screen when we're showing the unit.
So you're going to run the report, but you're typically, if someone checks that box that says yes, I've been evicted, they're out automatically.
Yeah, just about. So unless there are super extenuating circumstances.
Like they're your brother.
No, that would violate the law.
Yeah. Good call.
All right, so we covered that one. Criminal is another really important one, and as a property manager, I can't tell you the number of times we've not approved an application because some of the things we found. So without going into too much detail on that, you as the landlord need to just establish certain criteria, what you're okay with, traffic stops, for instance. I mean, those are more civil than they are criminal. Or also take a time element into factoring into your equation. So if they were, arrested for, say, public intoxication, using your example, 20 years ago, and they're otherwise clean since then, they're probably good. If, on the other hand, they have a, criminal homicide and they're out on parole, probably not the type of person you want to rent to. The same would go with theft or narcotics.
But again, the key there is having a criteria.
Yeah.
So you could legitimately say, look, we don't deal with anyone who's ever murdered someone.
Right.
And I think that's
we would hope they were still locked up.
Probably a fair standard. But you could also say, hey, if you have a drunk driving and it's more than 5 years ago, it's okay. If it's in the last 5 years, it's not. But you have to establish a criteria, stick to that criteria, and never vary it.
Correct. So we've now covered the criminal and the credit part of it. Moving on is now, as equally as important, one's ability to pay rent. So this is income verification. So an industry standard is 3 times the monthly rent in gross income. So in other words, what are they making before taxes, right? So if your rent's $1,000 a month, you're looking for at least $3,000 a month in gross income.
And that's pre-tax gross income.
Pre-tax.
So if their check's less than that, it's okay. How do you evaluate, like, if they're putting a bunch of money into a 401k or something? Do you take that into account at all?
Well, yeah. So we also do a debt to income, which doesn't really take into account investment.
I just wonder, like, what they actually, they're because someone's take-home pay could be significantly reduced if they're putting 30% in their 401k.
Yeah. So we'll look at the top line first. How much are you making before Uncle Sam?
Because they could always stop the
takes their
401k
bite.
or whatever. Yeah, that makes sense.
So then the next thing we'll look at is a debt to income. So we'll add up their things like credit card payments, student loans, automobile loans, etc. We'll add the housing payment to that, and then we'll divide that by their monthly gross, and that cannot exceed 45%.
And you're getting the debt from your application and also from the credit report.
Yeah, it shows up on their credit report, exactly.
And I'm assuming you also look at, like, how long they've been at a job.
Yes. Length of job history is as important as anything else. Somebody that continually changes work, probably that's a stressor. It means more than likely as their landlord, you're going to have a period where between jobs, they might not be able to pay you the rent. Okay. Now,
what do you look for there? I'm just curious. Like, are you looking for like a year?
You want generally at least 12 months.
12 months,
something like that. And by the way, a lot of this depends. You can have a sliding scale as long as you're applying it evenly. But how you might look at somebody for an apartment versus a high-end house or something is going to vary between asset classes.
That makes sense to me.
Yeah. Rental history. So we always try to get your last 3 residences, and there's a reason why. Reason why is that if somebody's trying to move right now, their current landlord oftentimes is not the best reference to use. Not that it isn't, but they could have a vested interest in getting rid of that
So what you're
person.
saying is, if I have a problem tenant and you call me up and say, hey, these guys are looking to move, I might be saying, yeah, they're a great tenant. You're gonna love them, even though I just want you to take them.
Right.
But if you find the landlord before that, then it's much less likely that person's gonna like lie and say they're great.
Yeah, they're far less motivated to not tell the truth down the line. Whereas the current one, like you just said, there could be a strong motivation for them to not be entirely honest.
Do you run into landlords that just refuse to give you any information? Because my policy when people call me on that is that unless my tenant signs something saying I can release information, I'll only say, yes, they're a tenant of mine, and I won't say anything else.
Yeah, we're the same. We want to. You can't provide that kind of information again because of legal.
Right. So, but do you run into that problem where people are, or do you get them to sign?
We get them to sign a form,
and then you fax it or email it to the landlord.
Completed an application with us and authorized us to run their credit and verify rental history.
Right. So, and then if
like
you
that.
provided me that, then I would tell you whatever it is.
Exactly.
Okay.
And you do need to also be careful how much information you do divulge.
Of course. Yeah, it's probably off topic, but yeah, I mean, as a landlord, that is important as well.
So, those are sort of the basic criteria that we use and that most people should use, even if they don't. One other thing to think about, as an investor, a lot of times the price of your unit will do the screening for you. And to be a little more clear about that, the higher it is, the smaller the pool of people that can afford to rent that type of unit. So there are different asset classes, as we mentioned. There's apartments, there's low-income housing, there is executive housing, et cetera, et cetera.
Sure. Well, also, sort of related to that is that people only are looking for stuff in their price range typically. So you don't usually get someone who's working for $10 an hour that wants to apply for a $3,500 a month rent.
Right.
And so you do kind of get a filtering, but you also have to recognize that if you go too low, you're going to maybe unprice people, right? Like people that are looking for, I want to be between 1,000 and 1,500 and you're at $995, they may literally not see that.
Right.
And so you kind of have to think about those, but you can't play a pricing game, right? Like when this is part of the screening process, but when you set the price at $1,000, it's $1,000 for everyone. It doesn't matter who.
Right.
If someone makes $10,000 a month, you can't go, oh, it's $2,000 for you because you can afford it. Has to
that
be
would be
same.
Discrimination.
Yeah, and that would, it's not the fair housing thing, but there are rules that prevent that as well. So.
Exactly. So that's all we got for today. We appreciate you joining us. Well,
I have one quick interjection here. If you would like to learn more about this topic, we did a previous episode on property management, and I think we covered some of these issues there. But also, one thing to think about is, if this sounds like a lot and you don't want to deal with it all, this is a good reason to have a professional property manager, which is why I was saying at the beginning of the video that I don't know a lot about this topic because I tend to not handle it myself. So.
Yeah.
But that is all we have.
Yeah, take us home.
So if you would be so kind as to like this video and to subscribe to our channel, we would love it. Also, we can be found on Facebook at Old Fashioned Real Estate, Twitter at Old Fashioned Real Estate, and both Brian and I are on Facebook, and I think our profiles are public, so you can check us out as well.
Thanks so much. Have a great day. See you again soon. Cheers.
Cheers.